Hello and welcome to a bonus edition of the Bulwark's Next Level podcast. I'm Tim Miller. I'm here with my best friend, Jonathan V. Last, and somebody I'm an aspiring friend, someone that I aspire to be friends with, Billy Corben, who is the famed documentarian of the second best ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, The U, in addition to Cocaine Cowboys, and now out this week, God forbid, a documentary about the Falwell cuckoldery. Billy, and how was that intro?
I'm I, I'm remiss to start the interview with me asking the host a question, but but you've laid it out there.
I
I mean,
have.
you set it up for me. So what is the first best
The first best was
ESPN 30 for
Once
30?
Brothers. It was the documentary about the Yugoslavian basketball players and how they all got broken up under Drazen Petrovic and Vlade Divac and all that, and they go back to Serbia. It's so good. It's about the Serbia-Croatia fight between these basketball players who were once on the same team and come to America. It's so good. If you haven't watched Once Brothers, it's
Yes,
real. I mean, it's not your fault. That
I'm
was just amazing. The U is unbelievable. The U is an awesome
I,
documentary. But number
I
two,
am partial to the two Escobars because cocaine. So
I do like cocaine
yeah.
related documentaries too. JVL, do you have a favorite 30 for 30?
No,
You don't?
I do not. The one about Iverson, right? This is because
Mm,
I'm an Iverson guy. So there
Iverson
was a
one was
30 for
good.
30 about Iverson that was great.
Okay, Billy, I want to start here. We need a little bit of a note at the top of the podcast, if you don't mind. It's a personal item of personal privilege, but I just want everybody listening to know that this is not a space. Even though there will be some jokes about cuckoldery, I think over the next half hour. This is not a
Hmm.
podcast that kink shames. If you are listening or watching on YouTube and you want to have the pool boy lay the pipe to your spouse, God bless you. I don't know what JVL thinks about that, but at least from my standpoint, I just want to get that out there. The problem for me arises, the mockery arises when you are masturbating in the corner while also trying to bring about a Christo nationalist authoritarian regime. That is, to me, the issue at hand. So, do we have any objections to that little preview that will allow us to make fun of Jerry Falwell Jr. in good spirit? No,
Yeah,
You
it's
have
fine.
to draw the line. Yeah, you have to draw the line somewhere. Christofascism seems to be a good line in the sand.
um, Billy, give us the background. How'd you? I mean, it's you're just watching the preview of this documentary, and it's like, oh my god, like how did you get the pool boy? Why is everybody willing to participate in this? Like, tell us how you got to the documentary.
So the documentary came to me. It's one of those stories. First, our office is in Miami Beach. It is 8 blocks away from the piece of property that becomes kind of a centerpiece in this scandal. Because without this shady real estate transaction and a dispute over it amongst this very Miami kind of like Elmore Leonard, Carl Hyacin esque, Cohen Brothers esque kind of set of characters, we wouldn't even be here talking about this. We wouldn't even know about this story. And so this had been on our radar since about 2017 when the first story about Jerry Falwell, the president, his wife Becky, the first lady of Liberty, the largest Christian university in the world, were owners of this $4.5 million piece of commercial real estate blocks away from our office that housed a liquor store, very much against the strict, some would say, puritanical Liberty Way code of conduct for students and faculty because there's no drinking. Then it housed what Politico described as a quote gay friendly flop house, end quote,
Hmm.
this youth hostel where kind of anything goes, also very much not in keeping with the spirit or the letter of Liberty University's rules, which don't allow for same-sex couples, which don't allow for sex outside the sanctity of marriage. Like I said, no drinking, no cohabitating, no cursing, no R-rated movies, no music with profane language, really a hip-hop ban, and descriptions of, you hear from students, for Netflix and chill, or as I now have to call it, Hulu and chill. You had female students in their dorm rooms watching a movie and their boyfriends outside on the lawn in like a lawn chair watching through the window,
That's
and
romance.
because they're not allowed. Yeah, so Liberty style. So it was a funny, ironic story. But when shit really got out of hand was when Aaron Roston, now at Reuters, then at BuzzFeed, wrote an even more sensational follow up, which was it's just when he revealed that there was this litigation that had been filed, and that the partner of the Falwells in this property is Giancarlo Granda, who, according to the public records in this court filing, was a former pool attendant that the Falwells met at the Fontainebleau Hotel while he was working and serving them. I mean, serving them like drinks and
Servicing?
food and towels and yeah, so
Servicing
both
them. Sure.
really, and who Becky had given a very good TripAdvisor review, by the way, too. After we had that in the documentary. He was a very prolific TripAdvisor reviewer, and so anyway, long story even longer. We were like, oh well, of course, there's more to this onion to peel, because how did this business thrupling, if you will, consummate and get started here? So really what happened was the blogosphere and the Twitterverse took over and started to impose all kinds of scenarios, which turned out to be not far from the truth in the
And you
end.
just felt like, because this was 8 blocks from you, you just were called, that there was sort of like a mandate from the heavens that you do a documentary on this.
Well, in the summer of 2020, June of 2020, an email came in over the transom, which means they went to our website, our company website, rackandtour.com, clicked contact us, and it landed in one of those info at, inboxes that my producing partner, Alfred Spellman, will occasionally check to see if there's anything interesting going on. And the subject was Pool Boy. And the
Piques your
author
interest.
of the email was Giancarlo Granda. I didn't need to read Pool Boy. I knew who Giancarlo Granda was. He was a Miami
Yeah.
guy, and so I opened it, and it was Giancarlo asking if I would be interested in making a documentary and telling his story, which of course we were.
Pool Boy came to you. Good for Giancarlo. Well, Sebastian, I want to show one of the early parts. You kind of alluded to this after the infamous TripAdvisor review. This could have just been a little one night stand, right? Could have been a little one night moment for the Falwells and Giancarlo, and just something to think about in their memory box in the spank bank. But they decided to push forward. And one of the things that shocked me the most about this was in this next clip. So, Sebastian, will you play the email from Jerry?
So I got an email on March 22nd, and it actually came from Jerry. It was a picture of us that we took at the Fontainebleau Hotel. It was a picture with me and Becky, and then one with Jerry. He sent the email saying, Becky wanted me to send this to you.
Immediately, I was like, who?
And she's like, oh, Jerry Falwell. She recognized the name. She's like, isn't that like the famous pastor or preacher?
Wait a minute, hold on. This cannot be the same people that I'm thinking about right now.
Giancarlo, God love him, didn't know who Jerry Falwell was, but his sister, he sent it from like Jerry at jerryfalwell.org or something. Like, what? He didn't create a fake Gmail for his little love life? What was the deal with that? I mean, you saw the actual email, I guess.
Oh yeah, and the email attached to it was a photo that they had taken outside their suite, well, on the terrace of their suite at the Tresor Tower at the Fontainebleau. Beautiful, beautiful suite. And one of the pictures was Giancarlo and Becky, and the other one was Jerry and Giancarlo, to memorialize their memorable trip to Miami Beach. And the morning after, he hooked up again with them the morning after that first night, to see them off, if you will. And so that really began, according to Giancarlo, a 7-year cuckold threesome with Jerry and Becky and Giancarlo that then evolved into this business partnership as well, that then evolved into Giancarlo being treated as a member of their family, as another sibling to their 2 sons and young daughter. And Giancarlo attended both of their sons' weddings as a guest of the Falwells. At one of them, Giancarlo recounts Jerry and Becky staying in the a presidential suite at the Greenbrier, and he would go up at their son's wedding and have sex with Becky.
JVL, do you have
I
any
mean,
thoughts
just
about
like every daughter dreams it'll be, I suppose.
that? I don't understand. Go ahead.
No, the entire thing is amazing. Out of curiosity, are there any things that stick out to you, having lived this story now, as just being too bonkers to believe? Like, like for me, it's a tiny detail, and it's that the first time that he bangs her, they go to the Days Inn. They leave the Fontainebleau to go to the Days Inn. And so these high rollers are just like, yeah, we'll go to the Days Inn down the street. And it's it's such a perfect detail, but also as you say, if this was, if this had been in a novel, we would have thought, oh man, that's a great detail. What knocked your socks off as you were getting into this?
Well, in this documentary, a lot of things stick out,
so to speak.
JVL. A lot of
I
things.
just want to apologize to my mother right now. Please, you can stop listening now, Mom. It's just going to get worse from here. Anyway, I'm sorry. Billy, go ahead.
Don't worry, Tim. She's not listening.
Okay.
But right, so my mother never listens to my podcast either. It's fine. So, but my mother listens to your podcast. So
hey, Mrs. Corben.
She's in the corner right
now.
No. So, things that stuck out to me in this, like, yes, well, you happened on a really delightful detail, because the Falwells they were all concerned. The Falwells were concerned because their adult children were staying in rooms also at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And Giancarlo was a little concerned, basically coming to his workplace after hours and going up to a room. He was concerned about, seeing management or coworkers. And so I think it was kind of even though the Falwells came up with the idea, he certainly was down for the cause, which is a few blocks south of the Fontainebleau on Collins Avenue. There used to be, it's now something else, but it was a Days Inn hotel. And so they definitely downgraded from the fabulous Fontainebleau Resort to the Days Inn. But I think, it was kind of like, it was certainly good enough to suit their purposes. In fact, they had Becky told Giancarlo that night, he recounts in the documentary, that an earlier evening, they had gone to a swingers club called Miami Velvet, a club made famous by Roger Stone, who was a fan and member and frequenter of Miami Velvet. He, in fact, conducted interviews at various times in his life and career in Miami Velvet with journalists because Miami. And so that was not their scene, though. It was too public. They were looking for a more private arrangement, like the one that they had fashioned with Giancarlo. But to me, I mean, I was trying to think of something else, because for me, the biggest surprise is a spoiler, way at the end of the documentary. So I'll try to not ruin anything, is to just say that when we talked to Giancarlo, we didn't just take his word for it. This was heavily, heavily vetted. We required as much corroboration as he could provide, and certainly things didn't make the final cut that otherwise would have, because we were not satisfied, or our attorneys were not satisfied with the level of corroboration. And so we had copious amounts of text messages. I mean, many multitudes of what you see, excerpted in the doc, video, emails, photographs, many of which are in the doc. But there was a piece of video evidence that comes not only late in the documentary, but very late in their relationship, that is just really revealing and really surprising. And even though we only used a very, very tiny sample of it, it is much more extensive in real life, let's say, and graphic. What it reveals at that late stage of the relationship was pretty stunning to me, and how it corroborates not just what was going on then, but what had gone on for the previous 7 years.
So for that, we'll need to get the Hulu Plus Premium Edition to get access to the director's cut in 6 months, right?
I can assure you it's not going to be on Disney Plus. I'll tell you that.
I'm not interested in this as a homosexual, but I think that whatever the material was that Tom Arnold saw, should really be in the Hulu plus edition, because Tom discusses some extensive videos of Becky that I guess he reviewed as part of just as part of some work that he was doing. Obviously, nothing extracurricular.
Can we just as peculiar as your preface was to that comment, can we just pause for a moment and relish in the absurdity that we're even talking about Tom Arnold right now? Can we just
I stood up from my chair when Tom Arnold appeared in the documentary. I was like, yes, now we're getting somewhere.
All of these, so Billy, all of these things intersect though. That's one of the things that I find so fascinating about this story, right? So we have Michael Cohen, we have Tom Arnold, formerly The Apprentice, we have Jerry Falwell Jr., and then we actually wind up with Mark Ebner, who is Giancarlo's co-author for his book version of this, who is Andrew Breitbart's writing partner. And it's, it's like the entire
MAGA world. Something
world.
About Mark Ebner. Ebner's a trip, dude.
It's an amazing confluence of events and people.
I think very often it's a pretty trite metaphor at this point. Peeling the onion, right? The layers of but this really is that. And Todd Schulman, our executive producer, works with Adam McKay at Hyperobject. He likens our work, or the best of our work, anyway, I hope this ranks among it, as a Trojan horse, where we kind of tempt the audience with the candy, and then we sort of sneak some broccoli in there on you. And so obviously I think you get some of the titillating details on this sex scandal, certainly, but also I hope there's a macro story in addition to that micro. I always liken Cocaine Cowboys, for example, to a mosaic, right? All of these people that we interview are individual tiles, and when you zoom out, there's the macro, there's the skyline of the city of Miami, and there's this bigger story that we're telling about how narco dollars essentially built a major American city, or provided the foundation for it anyway. And so I hope that we're doing something similar here, where you walk away going, oh shit, I might have learned something from the sex scandal documentary that I
learned something. I want to get to the broccoli, but I have one more question about something you mentioned first that I couldn't get past. And I guess it doesn't seem like the Falwells were that cooperative with the documentary. I guess it's hard to say, but maybe you get a sense for it. The kids thing, I mean, the wedding, the Greenbrier story is titillating and obscene, but it's also like, how did the kids not know? I just don't understand. They have multiple adult children. Like this, Giancarlo is like around all the time now. He gets invited to the house. He's going to the wedding. Michael Cohen, who I'm going to get to next, sniffs this thing out in about 1 minute, it seems like. And yet the kids have this guy living in their home. Like, what do you have a sense? Does Giancarlo talk to you about that? Like about his relationship with the kids and how that?
The first point that Giancarlo made, which I found very compelling, is that they were the first family of this college campus community, of which they lived in, adjacent to it, not on the campus, but in Lynchburg, Virginia, and invited. They had a very large kind of ranch home on a lake with different houses, at least one, if not more, Confederate cemeteries on the property. And they would invite the campus community to the lake, to their home. So Giancarlo said it wasn't entirely unusual for them to have college-age, men and women around them. And that was part of the camouflage, if you will, in the cover. Also, they were in business together. He was our friend from the Fontainebleau, is how they introduced him to Donald Trump and Michael Cohen in the story we'll get to. And they were in fact business partners in this LLC, in this major real estate transaction down in Miami Beach. It had the added benefit of being true. And one of the partners in the LLC was Jerry Falwell III, Trey, the eldest son of Jerry and Becky. So they did enmesh him into the family and create this gray area where he was like another son, a third son to us and a sibling to our children. But he told us a story that did not make the final cut, so you get a bit of a deleted scene here. At one of the son's weddings, after the reception, in a lobby bar where a great many of the guests had kind of retreated to for the not well after the after party. It's the hotel lobby, right? So they're in the hotel lobby bar. There's like a
I don't think we
karaoke
can do that
party
reference
going.
anymore, Billy. I'm sorry. I think that that's canceled. R. Kelly quotes, but
Is that
yeah.
is yeah?
Anyway, sorry.
Is that okay? I feel like that's been oft requoted
Okay,
though enough
yeah,
that
the
we can
ignition.
that
Okay,
we can
and I'm
be
sorry
careful
to
now.
interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah.
At the after
So
party.
but so there's this karaoke party, and Giancarlo describes a scene in which Becky is hanging off of him, like quite openly in this at this party, and um, he got scared. He's like, "Do people know? Is this like, am I the only one who's trying to pretend this isn't happening?" And she was just, the social lubrication had obviously taken hold, and he was a little embarrassed by it. So I think it does lead to your question of like who knew what and when, but they didn't talk about it with the kids, and whether or not they suspected anything, I just don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe it's one
So
of those.
I have a question about this. So part of my thesis is that Jerry never gets brought down, except that everybody at Liberty hates him, and that he's basically Kim Jong Un, right? He's the idiot son of a guy who was kind of shrewd. And he is, there's a quote in one of the big Politico pieces about this where he said, Liberty is not a school. It's a hedge fund that buys real estate using, investment dollars from parents. And, they just convince basically Fox watchers and OAN watchers that, college is terrible. Send your kids here. And then they use the tuition dollars to just buy shopping centers and stuff like that. And Falwell does seem, for a very long time, it's not like things just went off the rails over the last 5 years, for almost the entire time, seems absolutely hated by everybody, even maybe his own brother. And so he has no natural allies there. But it's the same omerta, right? So everybody at Liberty knew what Jerry was doing business wise, and just like nobody said anything about it because he would just,
Yeah.
the place was a
The
dictatorship.
kids aren't
Nobody
saying
had
anything because
tenure.
they're getting daddy's money, right? It's like,
And right. And so I wonder if
Yeah.
in the family it was the same way, the same sort of thing. Like, look, everybody knows the score, but you don't rock the boat.
Oh yeah, the board of trustees. Jerry didn't answer to the board. The board answered to him. I mean,
Yes.
it was like Goldfinger style. I mean, if you even questioned him, he pressed the button and the trap door under your chair would
Yeah.
open, and you'd fall. You'd fall right into the trash heap. It didn't matter how generous you had been, how long you had been involved with the institution. You were done the moment you crossed Jerry, and all of his immediate family was employed by the university. His children, their spouses, Becky, certainly his brother, but certainly all of his immediate family. There were cousins and aunts and uncles as well. And I will say this, that his children were collateral damage in this because they were all shit canned. I mean, Jerry Falwell III was the presumptive heir to the throne, just like Jerry Jr. had been, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, he certainly was not the religious
Right.
leader that his father was. It was his younger brother Jonathan, who in fact took over Thomas Road Baptist Church, the religious side of the business, whereas Jerry Jr. took over the presidency of the business side of the business, or the education side of the business, and helped build that institution into a multi-billion-dollar endowment, $100 million in capital, campaigns and improvements and construction to the campus. He made a lot of people, including himself, very rich in and around Lynchburg. And he was, to be fair, by training and trade, a real estate attorney. So he turned into that curve, and as a result, made the campus beautiful and state of the art, and of course made some people, at least, a lot of money. But yeah, I think probably, I mean, the kids might be disappointed that their financial future and security is no longer a foregone conclusion as it had been.
The one little factoid that makes you think that the kids actually didn't know, and that these are some sheltered kids, which was, I think, my favorite little factoid in the documentary, was that their mother was missing so often on vacations. They made T-shirts that said "Where's Becky," and they wore these T-shirts. So anyway, that leads one to believe that maybe they weren't in on the
And
joke. Like, if they really knew their mom was getting banged by their buddy Giancarlo, I don't know that they would have made that would, I guess, be another layer of debauched family relationships if they made t-shirts just to troll her over her love life. I think that seems unlikely, but who knows?
We tried to find like a photo of them wearing the shirts or to know what the design looked like. We were unable to find it. But that factoid that Giancarlo shared with us in his interview was corroborated by the Falwells in an interview that they gave. In fact, where they joked about those shirts that they had made.
Okay, one guy that did sniff it out was Michael Cohen. I want to get into the politics of this for the last little bit. Sebastian, can you play the clip, the Michael Cohen clip?
Michael Cohen approached me, and Donald Trump is going to run for president, and they want my endorsement. I didn't take it seriously. I'm like, you can't be serious, right? Like, it's probably for ratings. There's no way he's actually running. He's like, no, he really wants to run. And we believe that he can actually win. If Jerry was going to get more involved with politicians, just like how his dad did, he had to ensure that all loose ends were tied.
So you learn pretty quickly that Michael Cohen sniffs this relationship out. That's as somebody who's been part of some shoddy business deals. All of a sudden he's like, so these two went into business at the Fontainebleau with the pool boy. I don't know. Michael Cohen sniffed a rat very quickly, and was able to gather, I guess, some pretty incriminating material that he may or may not have shared with Tom Arnold. But the interesting part of this to me is not just that Cohen sniffed it out, this thing that was secret for 7 years so quickly, but also that the doc pretty strongly implies that this was used as leverage to get Falwell to endorse Trump in the primary. Like, what's your sense of that?
Well, Michael Cohen now and the Falwells always deny that there was any quid pro quo here. But Michael Cohen told a slightly different story in his book, and that was during a time when, of course, he was, had been excommunicated from Trump world, and the Falwells were still very much within it. Now that they're all pariahs, I suspect that they have re-met again. They've made that that friendship connection again, and so he kind of pulls his punches a little bit more now when it comes to this story. But I will say that first and foremost, Michael Cohen was known as the fixer because he fixed shit. I mean, he earned that title. It was, we think of him now as sort of a character or caricature, but that was his legitimate role in the Trump organization. And he went everywhere with Trump, including to Liberty University in 2012 for this event, where Giancarlo was also in the green room, accompanied them on the private tour that Trump got from the Falwells, and Giancarlo describes how Michael Cohen looked at him sideways. Our friend from the Fontainebleau, who is this 20-year-old kid who's not a student at Liberty? Like, what? How do they know this guy? What is he doing here, for crying out loud? And that was kind of his, right? That was his sixth sense. That was his job, was to identify people, their weakness, to borrow a term, compromat, if you will, and be able to have that, not for his advantage, but for the boss. And so he recounts in his book that when Jerry and Becky, because they maintained this relationship from 2012, that was the other thing too. Like Michael Cohen, when he thought there were useful relationships and connections for the boss, he would maintain that friendship. You didn't have, Donald, texting Jerry and Becky. You had Michael kind of keeping that ball in the air in the event that would become useful at some point. And it actually became useful for Jerry and Becky first, because when they got involved in this real estate transaction in Miami, and these friends of Giancarlo who helped them in this real estate transaction came forward and said, hey, we didn't get our the piece of the action that we were promised. They were claiming that they knew the truth about this relationship between Jerry and Becky and Giancarlo, and that they had photographs, incriminating photographs, that could help prove their case. And if they don't want them to file a lawsuit making this dispute and these allegations public, and thus compromising, their lives and reputations, they would settle this matter forthwith. And so Jerry freaked out, called Michael Cohen and said, hey, can you help us out? Michael Cohen made some calls, and to his credit and to his claim as a fixer, it went away for a while. He made this conflict disappear. The pictures never saw the light of day. But then, of course, Michael Cohen was in possession of these photos, and he did in fact show at least one, if not more of them, to Tom Arnold, because that's how weird this story gets.
There's another insight in this part that I liked, that there's two ways in which the Falwells are kind of, somewhat one of the things that are responsible for our dystopian MAGA life, right, that we live in right now. One is this butterfly effect of Michael Cohen having this leverage, maybe a quid pro quo, maybe not. But the other thing you talked about is that, like, Trump really was appealing to Jerry because he's kind of a televangelist. I thought that was an interesting kind of observation, right? Like, there is, on one level, you're like, oh, Trump is so unchristian. Like, what was the appeal there? On the other hand, it's kind of like, Trump and the televangelists have a lot in common, actually. Jerry was drawn to that.
And Jerry was a real estate magnate. Jerry fashioned himself, a bit of a Donald Trump. And so there was an organic kinship there. And in fact, Jerry Jr. will tell you that he was going to endorse Trump regardless, or irregardless, as we say in Miami, because we're irrilliterate, though I use it ironically. But Jerry it would have been much more organic for Jerry to endorse in that primary Ted Cruz,
right,
who was, of course, not only an evangelical Christian, but his father is a pastor. Ted Cruz, in fact, announced his presidential run at Liberty University at a convocation there. He thought he had that endorsement in the bag, and it was Jerry Jr., the first evangelical leader to endorse a twice divorced liberal Democrat playboy from New York City, of all places. Might as well be Sodom and Gomorrah. And a man with 5 children from 3 different women as their candidate, like the last guy you would think, and that kicked the door open. I mean, that was the first domino, really, that fell, that made Donald Trump the candidate of the evangelicals, a voting bloc who have helped elect every Republican president since Ronald Reagan.
And all while he and his supporters complained that anybody who didn't support Trump was a cuck. That's the best part of all of this, right? It's the projection is the sincerest form of Trumpism. But this actually really hits one of Trump's really keen powers, is sensing weakness, right? And so the evangelicals were going to be a tough nut for him to crack. And so what you do is, what Trump did was he zoomed in on the weakest guy he could find and turned
the cuckest.
him. And the cuckest, right? A guy who's so submissive that the first time his wife is banging another dude, when he goes over to get closer, Giancarlo says to him, "Hey, step off, bro." And Jerry's like, "Oh, sorry.
Yes,
right?
sir."
That's how submissive he is. And anyway, but the genius of Trump is that he did understand that if you can move a couple evangelicals, then the pressure on everybody else to throw in just ratchets up further and further and further. And eventually it'll be the Russell Moores who get kicked out of the movement for not supporting him, right? They will be the ones who pay the price, not him, Donald Trump. And so that's a piece of animal cunning that he has.
Every accusation is a confession, So when you hear cuck, when you hear sheep, I mean, in the church, they are called a flock for a reason. It is a very powerful echo chamber. And when you get that endorsement, when you get that, like, whatever you thought you knew about Trump, that he's a libtard, that he's an abortionist, that he's a Democrat, it suddenly goes out the window because this person of power. And that's the thing about Jerry, despite the fact that he wants to play it off that, well, I'm not I don't have the religiosity of my father, I'm not a Christian leader. He certainly relished in the power of the pulpit, and so he enjoyed that discrepancy, that, like, okay, I'm not a real Christian, but I'll tell all these Christians what to. And I think that's important to note here as well, is this documentary is not about Christians and Christianity. This is about people who exploit Christians and Christianity for power and profit. And I think, and that's the real disconnect here, is this idea of this holier than thou hypocrisy. I don't care about what they're into sexually. I'm from Miami. God bless. Like, that's the point of Miami.
Yeah.
Like, come down here and live your best life. I mean, if you want to, I mean,
this is
come
actually
down here,
we're running out of
party.
time, but I wanted to ask you about this really quick. Do you think that the Falwells, part of the reason they felt free there was in Miami? Because I was watching this and I'm like, how many people at the Fontainebleau really know what's happening at Liberty, right? Like in some ways, it might have felt a little bit like they were safer there because of the culture.
Yeah, they felt anonymous there in New York too.
Yeah.
And I always say that Los Angeles is where you go when you want to be somebody. New York is where you go when you are somebody, and Miami is where you go when you want to be somebody else. It's just it's always been a sunny place for shady people. It's always been that Vegas-esque. What happens in Miami stays in Miami. They came down here. They lived their best life. God bless them. I think the rub there, no pun intended, is of course this holier than thou hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I think we've seen how dangerous it is when leaders, be it in academia, politics, corporate America, when the philosophy is do as I say, not as I do. The rules, the laws, they don't apply to me, they apply to everyone else. That gets incredibly dangerous. The idea that we should put women in prison for having abortions, but the men who finance them should go to the United States Senate. There is certainly some disconnect between the flock and the leadership. And to that end, the people of Liberty University, I think, were collateral damage here.
Can I ask one question, Billy, before we get out of here?
I will have one
Billy,
more point of personal privilege at the end as well. We'll keep it quick.
Here's my question. If all of this unspooled today, do you think Falwell still gets driven out of Liberty? Because my sense is that world has basically now fully accommodated themselves to the idea of hypocrisy in the service of power. And where Liberty, I mean, it took, God knows, a ton of people and like high up people within, it wasn't the AP that drove Falwell out of Liberty. It was the trustees and the Christians there. I don't know that movement would be there today. What do you think?
But I think that Jerry Falwell was one of those dominoes that helped us get to here, meaning his downfall and that scandal. So without it, we might have skipped a step in terms of this moment in history. But I will say two things about that. First of which is that, as I said, the Liberty kind of campus community, students and faculty who were collateral damage here in terms of diminishing the value of their degree, diminishing the reputation of the institution. There are people who are pure of heart there, who are true believers in the Gospels and in the mission of that university. And so I think that Jerry Falwell Jr. Failed them. And I think he failed them then, and I think he would have failed them now. So I think that this would have been the inevitable outcome of that. That said, we live in a time, we are old enough to appreciate that. I don't know, everybody listening will be, but where we can turn on the TV right now and watch Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker preaching on television. That is I never thought I would live long enough to see that day. So he is very much from a culture of forgiveness and of second and third acts. And so I would not be surprised if this was not the last that we saw of Jerry and Becky.
Me neither. I do. In the spirit of holier than thou hypocrisy, I need to come clean about something. This has brought up, this documentary brought up a memory that I had tucked away. That as a closeted homosexual in Virginia, in Lynchburg, in, I don't know, the early aughts, I was at a bar with some Liberty kids, including a young woman, and we drove back to the Liberty campus. At which point, I thought we were going to have like an after party. But I didn't really realize the rules of the Liberty Way at the time. And I was informed on the drive back about all the limitations about what one could do. Go back to your dorm and hang out. Can't even play a board game in the same room as her. I could feel her tension in the car. And we get there and I get a very heavy makeout, very wet, heavy makeout, followed by kind of like looking around the window, followed by getting out of the car and being like, let's still keep in touch. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, we've got a lot of problems in this situation. Actually, it's like your dorm room. I'm dealing with my sexuality. I don't know if we should keep in touch. So I want to apologize to that young woman for leading her on. But I do feel like that experience, just that 1 hour, gave me an insight into just like, it is bullshit, right? It is gross. Like the culture, and I think it has negative ramifications. As funny as that story is on the mental health of people who are dealing with this, who are living on campus, struggling to either deal with their sexuality, dealing with sexual abuse in certain cases, or harassment, while these assholes are down there cucking around at the Fontainebleau. And that is bullshit. And I do feel bad for those kids on that front. And in addition to the kids who believe this stuff genuinely.
I mean, they are being punished. They're being fined. There are monetary fines under the Code of Student Conduct. So your economic stability is being is at risk. There's suspension, expulsion. Your academic and future prospects are put at risk as a result of the very behavior that Jerry and Becky are. I mean, they looked at the 10 Commandments as like a bucket list, as like they're like 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments are like hashtag goals. They're like, let's cross these things off one after the other. And in an odd way, they even got to the biggie, thou shalt not kill, on January 6th. So they made it through that list.
All right. Well, on that note, Billy, final question. Is the U back? They have recruited the number one cornerback in the country. They stole him from Florida, which I love as an LSU Tiger fan. Can the U be back?
We are entering I think our third consecutive rebuilding decade. But yes, I think if anybody can do it, Mario Cristobal can, and I believe in Cristobal, and I'm looking into my crystal ball right now, and I see the future of the Canes, and I trust the system. I trust the process.
Awesome. I love that. I loved that Ken Dorsey team. One of my favorite non-LSU teams of all time. Maybe my favorite. Thank you so, Billy. This has been so awesome. Let's do it again. It's been a good show. Pretty long show. JVL, any final thoughts?
Thank God Sarah wasn't here.
Thank God Sarah wasn't here. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Next Level podcast on the Bulwark. Billy, we'll talk to you soon.
Good night and good cuck.
See you, man.